I accidentally swallow strepsils because they're so smooth. So then you feel it go, you know, when you feel it going down your esophagus, you're like, oh God.
I'm not finished.
Carmen's got strepsil in her mouth, so she can't introduce the podcast today. So I will introduce the podcast and say, welcome to the Purple Goat podcast. Very nice to have you here. Today we are going to talk a bit about the changing face of social media and how someone like myself, who in the context of social media is ancient, will say millennial for the sake of today's conversation, and how social feels to me and how I use it, and how things have sort of progressed in my lifetime compared to Gen Z, which today will be Carmen. How's that strepsil coming along, Carmen? I think you got to crunch it.
Okay. Well, first, how do you use social media? How do you think it's different to how I or Gen Z uses social media?
So I'll give you a brief timeline of how I use social media at the time. In 2007 or 6, that's how old I am, sorry, Facebook came out, and I just got to university, and suddenly everyone was adding everyone from their course and all their university friends. And then when you were going on night out for university, someone would be like the designated photographer, and then all of those photos would go up on Facebook, and they'd be tagging everyone, and it'd be almost like a full-time job. But your social worth was probably the photos that you were tagged in on Facebook. Similarly, those Facebook photos were absolutely, the start to the end of the night, and there was no filter, there was no adults in inverted commas, and there was nothing work related. So, I mean, this is probably an incriminating thing to say, but I don't think I've deleted my photos from
Everyone go
from
climb
2000 and
Sunflower.
2008, or 2007, but yeah, like the photos then that ended up on Facebook and are still there for many people to see, you would not have that today. Like the idea, I think I was telling you earlier, like in those days, oh God, in those days, the idea of turning a camera around and actually taking one of yourself, people would do that in, a bar or a club and accidentally take a photo of themselves. And then everyone would just hysterically laugh because it was so outrageous and outlandish to take a photo of yourself. And so quickly, I think that has changed. I don't know when the moment was that people started taking selfies, but it was just something totally like not a thing when I was first on social media.
So Facebook was the first one for you.
Facebook first, then Twitter, and then really grainy photos on Instagram that were like really overly saturated because that was all that the phones at the time could do. So you put the filter on it and it'd be like...
Was it Replica?
I mean, there was definitely like that replica app to make the filmic look.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was definitely a bit of that. And I think that slowly over time, as our parents' generation went onto Facebook, everyone left. Of my generation, anyway, or lots of people. And then people moved slowly to Instagram. And then as I've got older, because I use social media for work, I essentially use social media less myself, just because I find that if I'm constantly on social media, then that's probably not a very healthy thing to be doing. So the fact that I'm on social media, quite a bit for work, means that I'm probably not on it as much in my personal life now.
Yeah.
How about you?
As in, when did I...
Your kind of journey of the
Social
first
media.
things that you were using, and how that differs from the way you use it now?
I think it was probably 2012, maybe. I think the first one was Twitter, and then I kind of went through probably Facebook at some point and Instagram. I think I was on Instagram since probably the very start with the awful pictures and the awful filters and everything. And I remember I used to get, so at that time, that was like over 10 years ago, I used to get really mad at something, and it makes no sense now. So back then, Instagram was meant to be instant pictures and you just upload them. So I used to get really mad at people that would just post pictures that they took like maybe like days before. And I was like, that's not Instagram. That's Instagram is supposed to be just in the moment. And I guess that's kind of what you see right now with things like BeReal, that it's more like instant, and you cannot change that. You cannot edit it. You cannot, add any filters to it. It's just interesting to see. But also with BeReal, I know I'm kind of going off topic now, but I'm seeing now, so it had a huge, I guess, growth a few months ago, and now not that many people are talking about it, which is interesting. It might have something to do with, I mean, I'd like to see what you think about it, but obviously Instagram now, you have lots of brands and lots of ads, and you have influencers, but with BeReal, you couldn't really see where the value was for brands, and basically to make the app have some type of money coming from somewhere, or just have some value. Obviously it's valuable, and it's less filtered compared to other apps, but I think you need to find a way to survive in the social media world somehow.
I think that for me, BeReal was a really refreshing change where, as you say, people were just taking a photograph of whatever they were doing. Of course, it's a little bit of a, peering behind the curtain as to, what's going on in their mundane life. But also there were moments of, well, this person actually in this moment is doing something absolutely ridiculously funny. And if you search like some of the best BeReals, that's brilliant content, because people are shooting their BeReal, but they happen to be in this most ridiculous scenario that might happen once in a like blue moon, but they've captured it on BeReal, which I find is like almost you're searching for those kind of images when you're on for something just really different. And I think you're totally right that as a commercial model, you maybe wonder how BeReal are going to keep people to the platform in the same way that we scroll on Instagram. We've got the stories that we can just endlessly click on and move through. You obviously have the same on Facebook, and then LinkedIn is just a continuous feed, so you could be fed more and more and more information.
And TikTok as well.
And TikTok. And so for me, the BeReal has this once a day little moment. It's almost like escapism for a day. So in that sense, it's funny, but absolutely I agree. Is it going to be something that is sustainable and keeps bringing people back, or eventually are they going to get bored of picking up their phone once a day and taking a photo and that being their BeReal and doing it every day for eternity?
And I think something that I realise is that some people, because basically BeReal, you get the notification once a day at a random point, but then some people started to see like, I'm not doing nothing interesting when the notification comes up, so I'll just take a picture whenever I'm doing something interesting.
Yeah.
And that's kind of
defeats the point.
Yeah. So, yeah, like I used to use BeReal, but then I found myself just, kind of doing that, and I'm like, no, it kind of defeats the point of the app. So
it's the same way that if you think about Instagram or Facebook, I mean, when people were first able to check in on Facebook, and people would check in at the first class lounge at Terminal 5 of Heathrow Airport, and it's them with their glass of champagne, and they're on their way to wherever. Like, yes, absolutely, they want to let people know they're off on holiday, and that's a nice thing. But you wonder how much of their mental sort of thinking around posting that is because they want to create that envy of what they're doing as an individual, and it might not be them at Terminal 5, it might be them at this really like exclusive club, or it might be them traveling the world, or it might be them with luxury tickets to see a concert, and you just think people got in the habit and they were checking wherever they are, and you just think like, what is the psychology behind that? And I suppose as someone that obviously used to use social media and didn't work in and around it directly, I worked in TV before, but then very much social media has consumed all of our lives. It's interesting to think about the psychological aspects at play, and actually what is it that we are getting out of social media as individuals, because we're clearly getting something out of it because we're all using
We
it.
wouldn't be using it.
Yeah, and so is it the endorphin hit of the likes and the things like that, or is it the fact that actually, as Mark Zuckerberg would have us believe, it's about connection, and the fact that actually I can still talk to my friends from university that are now dotted all around the world, which absolutely is a thing that is awesome, and I'm just one click away from having a video call with a friend in the west coast of America, and that is an amazing thing about social media. But it's hard to know where the balance is, and I think that probably changes over time in terms of what people are getting out of it and why they're using it.
Yeah. In terms of, so hypothetically, if you were not working in social media, if you had to say which generation, so millennials or Gen Z, has a harder time in terms of the mental health and social media, like social media affecting the mental health, which generation do you think will be?
Without a doubt, I think that I am so fortunate to not have grown up with social media as a teenager and even before. I think that the idea that if I was at school and you have that like jostling and whatever, and it's a dog eat dog world in school sometimes, and then the idea that people would be going home and continuing that same, oh, who's got the most likes, who's said this about who, and it's totally out of the school's remit, and it's still that same kind of thing going on. For me, that is absolutely terrifying, and I'm so glad that I didn't have to do that, and people shouldn't have to mature and grow up and aspire to be someone that they're not when they're 12 years old. Actually, you want people to have time to create an identity for themselves. And I suppose that with social media, one thing that is very real is we have so much stimulus on us, and we've got these perfect, lives and aspirational things that we're seeing, and remembering that actually just being comfortable in who we are ourselves, that is the most important thing. And actually, in terms of looking after yourself and your mental health, being comfortable in who you are as a person, and not actually being so affected by the opinions of other people. I know that's very much easier said than done in certain circumstances, but actually, that's probably a much better way of getting towards somewhere that you feel more whole, I suppose. Don't know whether you'd agree with that yourself.
Yeah, I think definitely Gen Z, social media. Yeah, I would say I feel like more so the generations after me, so people that are now teenagers, I think they're having a harder time now, although they probably have more resources than I did. And they know more about mental health, and those conversations are online on social media for them to see.
I was going to ask about the kind of changing content that we see on social, and I think your point around people having more exposure to different types of content now can absolutely be a massive plus. You know, in the way that progressive opinions about certain things can actually spread like wildfire now, and actually something that maybe took decades to change in the public psyche through social media and people championing perspectives that are, you know, need to be changed, you know, inclusion being one of them. We see that fundamental shift much more quickly through the adoption of social media, which
Yeah.
is absolutely like a huge positive. And so younger people are exposed to really progressive, you know, ideas. Obviously, everyone's in their echo chamber as well. I don't doubt that. So we see what we want to see, but at the same time, there is the opportunity to be exposed to it, which I think that 50 years ago, maybe in certain communities, you'd never see certain things, and therefore you wouldn't have an appreciation for them. So for me, that's definitely a real plus that, you know, the generations coming through now have that my generation not so much, you know, had in the same way.
Yeah, and you also see that now, obviously, Gen Z has starting to become consumers. And because they've had that experience of being exposed to more diversity on social media, they're expecting that from brands, and they want to see that in adverts and all of that, and in shows and films. They want to see more diversity. And that's also great because it's like, oh, these are now my consumers, Gen Z. Maybe I have to start rethinking diversity and, you know, but yeah, definitely. And I think that's a great thing. One of the great things about social media, and one of the things why I still use it, is because you see people that you don't see anywhere else, as in on TV. You sometimes see them a bit more now on films and shows, but yeah, maybe
It's still
few examples here and there.
still much slower adoption on what we would call like mainstream media than
Yeah.
what we see through social,
And
isn't
it's
it?
interesting as well to see how some, I don't remember her name, but you see some people that have kind of grown on social media, like especially on TikTok, and they've become like singers. Or you have like Charlie D'Amelio and her sister as well. But you also have, there's another girl, I cannot remember her name, but she's an actress, and I think she probably still does make videos on TikTok, and now she's going to be in the new season of Heartstopper on Netflix.
Is this the moment that I admit that I don't always understand TikToks?
Yeah, this is really hard. I need like a manual every time I explain to them a TikTok. I need to just like be step by step, and even then.
I'll try and, for the audience's benefit, considering that I'm selling TikTok campaigns sometimes, I probably should try and caveat what I said. But essentially, in again, in my my day, in my generation, and particularly with a background in kind of TV, film, everything that was produced had a start, a middle, an end, and it had this narrative arc, and you knew exactly what the content was made for in some shape or form. It might just be art and like a soundscape or whatever, but you'd have a really strong handle of what it was trying to achieve and what it was doing. I sometimes see TikToks and I genuinely have to watch them 10 times because I don't understand.
And then message me and be like,
Yeah, what does
can you explain
yeah,
this to me?
I don't understand. The bit that I don't get is what would have made them know that like thing, you know, whatever they've created, it doesn't have a story, it doesn't have like words, it's not something impressive, it's just like a thing, and it blows up for whatever reason, And I look at it and go, that bit of that little world of TikTok, still,
It's interesting how I completely just a few years apart, a completely different generation just gets it. Like, can see one TikTok, a trending sound, and just gets it. And I'm sure we are obviously generalizing here, but for you, it just doesn't happen.
I just find it fascinating the bit of what goes from the idea to the creation. So for me, the what's the thought process, the creative journey, because that creative journey in my background in my profession was so different as a workflow to obviously what these creators are doing now. So yes, they are absolutely like amalgamating a load of trends and sounds and things that have worked for other creators and things that society is deeming as shareable content, and they're kind of morphing that into their own brand and identity and producing content which is a million miles away from someone going, right, let's make something that's visually spectacular, let's make a really awesome soundtrack, let's have a really strong narrative hook and educate people from A to Z. Of course, all of those bits are on different parts of TikTok, of course, but you see so many bits that are just a tiny fragment of that, and people bring into their own content so much diversity, so much creativity, and it works. And I'm learning lots every day, but I'm not going to be a TikTok creator,
TikTok teacher.
and I'm not going to be a TikTok creator anytime soon, unless I accidentally go viral.
If you were on TikTok, what type of content will you make?
Is this when I get to plug Tiny Man Chef again?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, I mean...
No, probably it'll be disastrous food adventures of Tiny Man Chef, available on Instagram at Tiny Man Chef.
What do you
One
think?
day it's going to go viral. One day.
What do you think I should make on TikTok?
I think that you should do the changing faces of Carmen when people say outrageous things. Because that's my favourite. And this is when you can put a clip of you reacting in your Carmen face to something outrageous.
From the other podcast, you can go and check.
From the other podcast, Gina and Charlie, check it out. Put it here, or wherever you put it. Yeah.
I think as well, like for me, there was obviously naturally more of the anxiety because obviously I've got my disability to contend with, and there was a load of stuff that I didn't realise till obviously we got to it, and it was kind of like, this is a sticky point. Mind the pun. This is a tricky bit for me to deal with.
Are there things that, as someone that's working in it every day, but also you've grown up with it way more, are there things that you think that you're doing as an individual that I could learn from?
I think obviously there are things that differentiate both generations, but I think there are tons of things that we can learn from each other. Like, millennials obviously have more of a detachment from social media, and I think Gen Z have to learn a bit more of that. And also, millennials have to learn how to use social media.
I've never felt older than this podcast in my life.
I'm sorry.
This is when you can put like an AR filter on me, where I've got like a peaked cap and a granddad jumper and a cane.
But I think also millennials and also some Gen Z as well just learn from all the exposure to mental health stuff and how to protect your mental health as well. And it's something that I think everyone is still learning, and social media kind of was thrown at us with no manual, and it was like, oh yeah, just use it and we'll see what happens with that. And you should never forget about your mental health.
Yeah. I think that openness to just speak to other people, to talk about things on social media that are happening in your life. I think that your generation are better at doing that. I think that things probably for my generation build up more, and actually they don't have a place to to disperse or to vent, if that makes sense. So you might be experiencing all of the negative aspects of social, but actually, I think as a generation, again, very broadly speaking, we're probably not as good at then using the tools and using the platforms themselves as a way of actually addressing some of those things and working through them too. Yes, it has its difficulties, yes, it has its benefits, but I think that we're more of a closed book as a generation, and I think that we
Yeah.
could learn a lot about opening up, because the more open we are, we know, generally speaking, it can be a lot healthier to do so.
Okay.
Double thumbs up. Thank you all very much for joining Carmen and I today on the Purple Goat podcast. There'll be plenty more Purple Goat podcast coming your way very soon. Also, thanks to Outset Studio for having us today. We're in their wonderful London Bridge studio today. It's very inclusive, it's very accessible, and that's why we're partnering with them, and we're really proud to be producing these lovely 4K podcasts from their studio space. So many more to come. Have a lovely day.
Bye.
Bye.